Hey folks, welcome to Deep Dive Dispatch, the podcast where we don't just scratch the surface. We dig deep into the political landscapes that shape our world today. I'm excited to introduce your guides on this journey through history and headlines, John Matthews and his insightful co-host, Sarah Collins. Together, they'll peel back the layers of complex political issues, offering a slightly conservative viewpoint while staying rooted in facts and historical context. So, buckle up for a thought-provoking ride as we dive into the stories behind the stories. This is Deep Dive Dispatch. Let's get started.
Welcome to today's Deep Dive, where we're going to be taking a look at the taxpayer costs of illegal immigration in the U.S.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Yeah, a lot of numbers to crunch.
It is a complex issue.
Yeah, we've got reports from Customs and Border Protection.
ICE.
IC analysis from the Federation for American Immigration Reform. Fair.
Yep.
We've got legal precedents set by Plyler v. Doe, public opinion from the Pew Research Center.
Yeah.
And even some direct testimony.
That's right.
From people affected by this.
So
by the end of this deep dive, you'll have a much clearer understanding of the financial burdens involved.
particularly from a conservative perspective.
Yes, and some potential solutions
That are being proposed.
Okay, so let's set the scene here.
Yeah.
The Pew Research Center tells us that over 80% of Americans
Wow.
think that the government is doing a terrible job
Yeah.
managing the migrant situation at the border.
Huge.
That's a huge chunk of the population.
It is.
And, when you consider the numbers involved, it's no wonder people are concerned.
Right.
ICE reports over 142,000 removals and 62,000 expulsions in 2023 alone.
Yeah, and those operations don't come cheap.
No.
FAIR estimates the net cost of illegal immigration to U.S. taxpayers in 2023 at $150.7 billion. That's a hefty sum,
It is.
and it's jumped almost $35 billion since 2017.
Wow.
To put that in perspective, FAIR calculates that's about $11,156 per year
For a year.
for every single American taxpayer.
Wow.
So,
Over $1,000 per taxpayer?
yeah,
That's really hitting people where it hurts.
it is.
So let's break it down. Where's this money actually going? FAIR's report identifies some key areas where there's the biggest financial drain.
Okay.
Education, for instance, comes with a $6.6 billion price tag for federal spending.
Wow.
That covers everything from primary and secondary schools to migrant education programs and English language instruction.
Right, and healthcare
Yeah.
represents another significant chunk.
Right.
With FAIR estimating a $23.1 billion expenditure.
Wow.
This includes things like uncompensated hospital care,
Mhm.
Medicaid births, and even Medicaid fraud.
It's a complex web of expenses.
Right.
But the bottom line is it's costing taxpayers a lot of money.
Yeah, and then you've got the cost of law enforcement,
Right.
which is no small potatoes either.
No.
FAIR estimates that apprehending, detaining, and processing illegal immigrants costs a staggering $25.1 billion.
Wow.
And what's important to remember is that these costs aren't just limited to Border Patrol activities.
Right.
They encompass a much broader spectrum,
Yeah.
including court proceedings, legal representation, maintaining detention facilities,
Yeah.
and a whole host of administrative expenses.
All right, so education, healthcare, and law enforcement. Those are some big ticket items. But what about
Social service.
social services and welfare?
And welfare.
There's a lot of
A
confusion.
lot of confusion around this topic.
Yeah, and that's where things get particularly interesting.
Our congressional testimony source shed some light on this.
Okay.
It clarifies that, in general, undocumented immigrants are not eligible for federal benefits,
Really?
which might surprise some people.
Yeah, that's a common misconception.
Yeah,
People assume that illegal immigrants are getting all sorts of handouts from the government.
that's right.
But if they're not eligible for federal benefits, then where does all the spending come in?
Well, that's where it gets complicated.
Oh, boy.
While undocumented immigrants may not be eligible for federal benefits,
Right.
some states, like New York and California, provide state-level benefits regardless of immigration status.
Wow.
So this creates a patchwork of policies across the country,
Right.
which adds another layer of complexity to this already intricate issue.
Okay, so we've got this complicated situation where some states are offering benefits
Right.
to undocumented immigrants, even though they're not getting federal aid.
Yeah.
What kind of impact is this having on the ground?
So to answer that, we have Daniela Souza Egarov's testimony.
Oh.
She is a legal immigrant and a school parent in New York City.
Oh, wow.
And she shares a firsthand account of how this influx of migrants is affecting her community.
I'm curious to hear her perspective.
Yeah.
I bet she's got some valuable insights that go beyond the numbers we've been looking at.
Absolutely. She talks about the strain on resources, especially for essential services like education.
Yeah.
With a limited budget, schools are struggling to accommodate the influx of new students, which often leads to cuts in programs and support services that impact all students, not just the children of migrants.
That's a great point. It's not just about the direct costs associated with providing benefits to undocumented immigrants,
Right.
but also the indirect effects on existing communities and resources.
Exactly. Her testimony really humanizes this issue
Yeah.
and highlights the need for a more balanced approach that considers the needs of all residents.
So we've got this complex web of federal and state policies, a strain on resources, and a lot of passionate opinions on all sides. It's definitely a thorny issue, but where do we go from here? Are there any solutions being proposed to address this financial burden on taxpayers?
There are definitely some proposals on the table, particularly from a conservative perspective, that aim to mitigate these costs.
Okay.
One recurring theme is the need for stricter border security.
Okay.
FR argues that reducing illegal entries is paramount to curbing associated costs.
Yeah.
The logic is simple. If fewer people enter the country illegally, there will be fewer people drawing on public resources.
That makes sense. It's like fixing a leaky faucet before you try to mop up the floor.
Exactly. Another common proposal is to enforce existing laws more rigorously.
Okay.
IC reports highlight their efforts to remove individuals who don't have a legal basis to be in the U.S.
Okay.
This approach focuses on upholding the current legal framework and ensuring that immigration laws are consistently applied.
So it's about making sure that the rules are being followed. And there are consequences for breaking them. I can see how that would appeal to people who are concerned about the rule of law.
Precisely.
And then there's the idea of reforming the asylum process,
Right.
which came up in the congressional testimony.
Yes.
The current system is seen as being vulnerable to exploitation, with lengthy processing times and a significant backlog of cases.
Yep.
The proposed solution is to streamline the process,
Right.
making it quicker and fairer for those with legitimate claims,
Yeah.
while deterring those who are trying to game the system.
Exactly.
So instead of focusing on restricting access to benefits,
Yeah.
this approach aims to address the root cause of the issue by making the asylum process more efficient and less susceptible to abuse.
Exactly. It's about finding a balance between providing refuge to those genuinely fleeing persecution
Right.
and protecting the integrity of the system.
It seems like there are some complex considerations here. We've got border security, law enforcement, asylum reform. These are all multifaceted issues with no easy answers.
You're absolutely right, and we've just begun to unpack the potential solutions being proposed to tackle the taxpayer costs associated with illegal immigration, and there's much more to explore.
So stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive, where we'll continue to unravel this complicated issue. We'll delve deeper into proposed changes and how they might alleviate the financial burden. See you soon.
See you there. Welcome back to our deep dive into the financial implications of illegal immigration. We've just scratched the surface of this complex issue, and now we're going to dig a bit deeper into some of the proposed changes that aim to tackle the fiscal burden we've been discussing.
It seems like there's no shortage of opinions on how to address this problem.
No.
But from what I've gathered, a lot of the proposed solutions, particularly from a conservative standpoint, revolve around kind of tightening the reins, so to speak.
You're right. A common thread running through these proposals is this idea of limiting access to certain benefits and services that might be seen as incentives for illegal immigration. One example of this is the push to restrict birthright citizenship.
Yes.
The 14th Amendment.
The 14th Amendment. That's a hot button issue for sure.
It is.
Some conservatives argue that the current interpretation, which grants citizenship to anyone born on U.S. soil, regardless of their parents' legal status, acts as a magnet for illegal immigration.
Exactly. The argument is that parents who are in the country illegally might be more likely to come here or stay here if they know their children will be granted automatic citizenship.
Right.
This, in turn, could lead to increased costs for taxpayers down the line as these children grow up and access public services like education and healthcare.
So changing this policy, they believe, would discourage illegal immigration and ultimately alleviate some of the financial pressure on taxpayers.
That's the argument.
It's definitely a controversial proposal, and I can see how it would spark some heated debate.
Absolutely. It touches upon some fundamental questions.
Yeah.
About citizenship, national identity, who gets to be considered American. It's a complex issue with deep historical roots and strong opinions on all sides.
Okay, so birthright citizenship is one area where some see potential for change. What other proposals are being put forward?
Another area that's often targeted for reform is the asylum process.
Okay.
As we mentioned earlier, the current system is often criticized for being overwhelmed, backlogged, and vulnerable to exploitation.
Right.
Those advocating for change argue that a more streamlined and rigorous asylum process would deter those who are trying to take advantage of the system while still providing protection for those with legitimate claims.
That makes sense. It's about striking a balance between compassion and practicality.
Yes.
You want to offer refuge to those genuinely fleeing persecution.
Right.
But you also don't want to create a system that's easily manipulated or that places undue burdens on taxpayers.
Precisely. One idea that's often floated is to implement stricter screening procedures and faster processing times for asylum applications. The goal is to weed out fraudulent claims more quickly and reduce the overall cost of housing and supporting asylum seekers while they await a decision.
So it's about making the process more efficient and less costly, while still upholding that principle of offering asylum to those who need it.
Exactly.
I imagine this would require some careful consideration and planning to make sure it's done fairly and effectively.
You're right. Any changes to the asylum process would need to be very carefully crafted to avoid unintended consequences or violations of international law.
Now, we've talked a lot about the costs associated with illegal immigration.
Yeah.
But it's important to acknowledge that there are also contributions
Of course.
made by immigrants, both documented and undocumented, to the U.S. economy.
Right.
I remember that Pew Research data showing that a majority of Americans across party lines believe that immigrants fill jobs that U.S. citizens don't want.
Yes, that's an important point, and there's evidence to back up that perception.
Okay.
Pew Research also found that immigrants make up a significant portion of the workforce in certain industries.
Right. Particularly those that are often seen as less desirable or more physically demanding.
Like agriculture, construction, certain service industries.
Exactly.
I've heard about labor shortages in those sectors, so it makes sense that immigrants would play a vital role in filling those gaps.
Exactly. And it's not just about filling jobs that Americans don't want.
Okay.
Immigrants also bring a diversity of skills and perspectives that can benefit the economy as a whole.
Right.
They start businesses, create new products and services, contribute to innovation and growth.
So it's a complex picture.
It is.
On the one hand, there are costs associated with illegal immigration, particularly when it comes to social services and welfare. On the other hand, there are also economic contributions made by immigrants that need to be considered.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's not a simple equation. It's a multifaceted issue with both costs and benefits, and any solutions need to take both sides of the equation into account.
And we can't forget the human element either.
These are real people's lives we're talking about, with their own unique stories, hopes, and challenges.
Absolutely. It's easy to get lost in the numbers and policy debates.
Right.
But it's important to remember that there are human faces behind those statistics.
We heard a powerful example of that in Danielle Souza Igarov's testimony.
Yes.
Her experience as a legal immigrant and a school parent in New York City really highlighted the complexities of this issue and the impact it has on individuals and communities.
Her story reminds us that immigration is not just some abstract policy issue,
Right.
but something that affects real people in very tangible ways.
All right, so we've delved deeper into some of the proposed changes aimed at addressing the costs of illegal immigration, particularly those focused on limiting access to benefits and services.
Yes.
We've also touched on the economic contributions made by immigrants and the importance of considering the human element in this debate.
We've covered a lot of ground,
But
there's still more to explore.
Right.
In the final part of our deep dive, we'll shift gears and examine some different perspectives on this issue,
Okay.
including those that challenge the notion that illegal immigration is a purely negative phenomenon.
Okay. Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll continue to unravel the complexities of this multifaceted issue and see what other insights our sources have to offer. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into the taxpayer costs associated with illegal immigration. We've covered a lot of ground, exploring the financial burden, examining proposed solutions, and acknowledging the contributions immigrants make to the U.S. economy.
Right.
It's been a fascinating, albeit complex, journey.
It certainly is a multifaceted issue with very strong opinions on all sides.
Yeah.
We've focused a lot on the concerns about the cost, particularly from a conservative perspective, but it's important to remember that not everyone views illegal immigration through the same lens.
That's right. In fact, some of our sources offer a perspective that challenges the notion that illegal immigration is a drain on the economy.
Right.
Remember that CBO projection we discussed?
Absolutely. The CBO, which is known for its nonpartisan analysis,
Right.
actually projects that the recent surge in immigration will boost the U.S. economy by $0.3 trillion over the next decade.
Wow, that's a significant figure.
It is.
Seems kind of counterintuitive to what we often hear about the costs
Right.
associated with illegal immigration.
Yeah.
How do they explain that projection?
Well, they attribute this potential economic boost to an anticipated increase in the labor force
Okay.
and a surge in innovation driven by new arrivals. It suggests that under certain conditions, immigration can actually be a net positive for the economy rather than a burden.
That's a fascinating perspective. So it's not as simple as saying illegal immigration is purely a negative phenomenon.
Right.
It seems like there's more to the story.
Precisely. And while the CBO projection is just that, a projection, it does raise some important questions about how we frame this issue and whether we're focusing too narrowly on the costs without adequately considering the potential benefits.
It seems like there's a need for a more nuanced approach,
Yeah.
one that recognizes both the challenges and the opportunities presented by immigration.
I agree. And it's not just about the economic considerations.
Yeah.
There are social and cultural dimensions to immigration that are often overlooked in these discussions.
That's true. We've touched on the human element, but it's worth reiterating that immigration, even when unauthorized, can bring a richness and diversity to a society that goes beyond economic metrics.
Think about the cultural contributions, the entrepreneurial spirit, the family ties that span borders. These are all aspects of immigration that are difficult to quantify, but nonetheless enrich the fabric of a nation.
So it's not just about dollars and cents.
No.
It's about people, their stories, their aspirations, and the impact they have on the communities they join.
Exactly. It's a reminder that this issue is about more than just numbers on a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
It's about human lives, complex societal dynamics, and the ever-evolving identity of a nation.
Well, I think we've done a pretty thorough job unpacking this complex issue. We've explored the costs and delved into proposed solutions and even considered perspectives that challenge conventional wisdom.
Yeah.
It's been a thought-provoking journey.
It has. We've covered a lot of ground and offered some valuable insights into the taxpayer costs of illegal immigration.
Yes.
Particularly from that conservative viewpoint. But as with any deep dive, it's just the beginning of a larger conversation.
That's right. And to leave you with something to ponder, consider this while we've focused primarily on the financial aspects. What about the non-economic costs and benefits of illegal immigration?
How do factors like cultural diversity, social cohesion, and the impact on communities factor into the equation?
Right.
These are questions that deserve careful consideration and thoughtful debate.
It's a complex issue with no easy answers. But hopefully our deep dive has given you the knowledge and the context to engage in those discussions in a more informed way. Until next time.
See you then.
Hey folks, thanks for tuning in to Deep Dive Dispatch. We hope you found today's episode enlightening and packed full of insight. Remember, your support keeps us diving deep into the stories that matter. So if you enjoyed the show, make sure to download and share it with others who crave a deeper understanding of politics and history. And don't forget, we want to hear from you. If there's a topic out there that you think deserves a deep dive, reach out and let us know. Your input helps us bring you the most compelling content week after week. Stay curious, stay informed, and we'll catch you next time on Deep Dive Dispatch. Keep exploring, folks.